everybody. Welcome to Running Start's Congressional Salon. This is the highlight of my month. We have some fabulous members of Congress here with us today, as well as some sponsors from both Walmart, who is our founding sponsor and our biggest sponsor, and Duke Energy, who is sponsoring this salon tonight. We are doing 3 of these, and they are leading up to an April 28th Young Women to Watch Awards, where we will elect a Running Start alum to serve as our ambassador for the year. So your moderator for the night, Sophia Hudegi, is one of our former ambassadors. For those who don't know, Running Start is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, and we train young women to run for political office. In the past 15 years, we've given more than 20,000 young women the confidence, capabilities, and connections to run and win. And our hope that is tonight, you'll be inspired by the Congresswomen in the room to think that maybe you could run and be like them in the not too distant or further on future. So I'd love to introduce to you Sophia. Sophia is a senior at Barnard College of Columbia University studying history. She is originally from McLean, Virginia, and will be attending law school this fall. And she hasn't told me where, but you should keep your eye on Sophia and connect with her after the panel because she is absolutely awesome. Pepper from Duke Energy is going to introduce our panel for the night. And so I will turn it over to you, Pepper.
I really appreciate it. And good evening, everyone. Pepper Natonsky with Duke Energy. Duke Energy is proud to support Running Start and to sponsor tonight's salon. At Duke Energy, we have the privilege to power the daily lives of our employees, customers, and our communities. Having a mission, vision, and values keeps us grounded as we do that important work. And I really appreciate that Running Start has a mission too, a mission in the programs and training that you all provide to equip tomorrow's female leaders with the tools to run and win. Speaking of female leaders who run, win, and then inspire other leaders and women once they are in public service, I'm really honored tonight to introduce women just like that, and that's tonight's panel. So I'm honored to introduce Congresswoman Donna Edwards, who is a Democrat who represented Maryland's 4th Congressional District from 2008 to 2017. We very much appreciate her service. Honored to also introduce former Congresswoman Martha Roby, who's a Republican who represented Alabama's 2nd Congressional District from 2011 to 2021. And new Congresswoman Mariannette Miller Meeks, who's a Republican who represents Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. And thank you all for the time tonight.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for being with us today. So the opening question is for everyone on the panel. So Running Start teaches young women that they should run for office because of their unique skills, their experiences and their identities are needed in the halls of Congress. So how did you bring your full authentic self to your role? And I'd love to start with Congresswoman Edwards.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for your question. I told my story. I told people when I ran for office, I was very open about my life, both the struggles, the challenges, and the successes. And I think that my constituents really embraced that. And that's what I brought to the Congress. When I first started working, for example, on issues related to childhood hunger and to healthcare, they were born of my personal experience, sort of struggling as a young woman and at some points without health care. And so I brought that to the table when I talked about issues that were important to me and to my district.
Absolutely. And I'd love to move to Congresswoman Roby.
Just you hit on the most important word, and that's authentic. Don't change who you are, whether that's in public service or in the classroom, wherever you may be in your life right now. Be who you are. You have so much to offer. Don't go change or try to mold yourself because you think that's the way you're supposed to be for a certain role. Just be who you are, and people will gravitate towards that authenticity that you bring.
Authenticity is so important and so palpable to not only the electorate, but the voters. Congresswoman Miller Meeks, I'd love to hear your response to that question as well.
I love the response of both Martha and Donna. And so it was my all of my life experiences. So for your audience who don't know me, and hopefully this will inspire some people, I'm the fourth of 8 kids. My father was a master sergeant in the Air Force, so we traveled around the United States. My mom had gotten a GED. No one in my family had ever gone to college. And when I was 15, I was severely burned. And throughout that long hospitalization, when I came out of the hospital back home, I told my parents I wanted to be a doctor. So how to navigate that without any mentorship, without any guidance. And my parents, being from very humble circumstances, didn't even know how they'd get a daughter through college, much less medical school. So they were a little dismissive. And like most Martha's soon-to-be 16-year-old, I presented a challenge and told I couldn't do it and it wasn't going to happen. So I left home at 16, started working, going to community college, enlisted in the Army at age 18. And I just continued to work and go to school, and ultimately spent 24 years in the military, and then got a degree in nursing so I could work at night, continue to get my courses and a master's in education, and then went to medical school. And so when I decided to run for office, it was very similar to what I've heard from both Martha and Donna. And that was the things that, I was being affected as a physician in how I could take care of my patients because of the government's intervention and government regulation. So I ran for office because I wanted to impact healthcare and how we do healthcare, and to reestablish the patient-doctor relationship. And Martha said something so important about authenticity, because I remember, so I have a very long name. As a matter of fact, my name is longer than my height. And I have this very long name. And so I was told, you have this great background, you're a veteran, you're a doctor, you come from humble circumstances, you're a former director of public health, yada, yada, yada. But you have this really long name. And so can you shorten the first name? And it's hyphenated, and you're a Republican. And so people were talking about changing my name. And so I just said to people, you're talking about my great life story and how sincere I am, and honesty and authenticity. And so if I change my name, the first thing I do in running for office is to change my name, that I'm not authentic. So I think, hopefully all of our backgrounds will inspire young women and allow them to have both the confidence. They already have the capability. So they just need the confidence and hopefully the inspiration from all of us to be able to run for office.
I would say, as a young woman hoping to pursue a career in politics with a long and complicated last name, that is truly touching to me. So I thank you for that. So next, I'd love to invite a representative from Running Start's founding sponsor, Walmart, to ask the next question.
My name is Betsy Savage Strong. It couldn't be more aggressive, so I 100% identify with that. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sophia. The Running Start Walmart Congressional Fellowship provides talented, high-potential young women with a once-in-a-lifetime experience of interning on Capitol Hill for the ultimate role model, a member of Congress. Since its inception in 2009, Walmart has given Running Start over $2 million to this program, which has placed 145 fellows in the offices of over 80 members of Congress on both sides of the aisle and in both chambers. On the topic of importance of internships, I'd like to ask Congresswoman Miller Meeks, what is the most important skill for an intern in your congressional office to have?
Enthusiasm and a willingness to learn.
So I like that. You're absolutely right. The best interns I've had have been the most enthusiastic and have never said no to the most impossible tasks. So 100% agree there. I'd like to ask a question of Congresswoman Edwards. What is the best piece of advice you've gotten from another elected official?
The best piece of advice was actually from Congressman John Dingell, who passed a couple of years ago. He was the longest serving member in Congress. And he sat me down one time in the Democratic cloakroom, because when I came into office, I beat an 8-term, 16-year incumbent, which may be in vogue now, but it wasn't then. And it turned out that it was somebody who was like a son to him, to John Dingell. And so I was intimidated, and Congressman Dingell asked me to come and sit next to him, and we talked for a while. And he said to me, "You're a congresswoman just like every single other member of Congress. The thing about Congress is that we all come, elected by the same 715,000 people, and you're not on a higher footing and you're not on a lower footing. And if you remember that, and remember that Congress is a place where so many generations have served, and that you always have something to learn. And I followed that advice.
I think that's something we can all take in our careers and take home with us in terms of advice, remembering that we're all on the same footing, no matter what path we're walking. Thank you for that.
So with our final few moments, I'd like to ask some rapid fire questions. So I'll address these questions to each person individually. And, we've got some time. So rapid fire is a little, just to keep it concise. I know we take a lot of time to answer these questions. So one of the first ones that I'd love to ask is, what was the first moment that made running for office feel worthwhile? This is a difficult, long road to get to Congress. So what was that first moment? There's many a moment, but what could you pinpoint? And I'd love to start with Congresswoman Roby.
Well, I'll try to be concise, but I was young, just gotten married to my husband, Riley. We'd just been married, and I was practicing law in my hometown of Montgomery, and was literally watching the 10 o'clock news one night and saw where my predecessor on the city council had announced that she was not going to seek re-election, and she had served on the city council for a couple of decades. And I had one of those moments of just like felt it in my gut. And I looked at my husband and I said at 26, I think I'm supposed to do that. And he said, well, okay. Do we even live in her district? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to find out tomorrow. And, kind of my feeling in my stomach was that I wanted a seat at the table. I mean, I was living in my hometown. God willing, we would have children one day. And if we were going to live here and raise our family here, then I wanted to be a part of making those decisions. And of course, I grew up in a home of a family of public servants. So I guess it was just kind of in my blood, but I never envisioned myself as running for office. I was a music business major in college and of course went on to law school, but I just knew instinctively that was something I wanted to be a part of. And so to all the young women listening to us tonight, I pray for your aha moment. I pray for that gut check time where you think to yourself, I got to do this. I got to step up. I tell people all the time, running for office is not like taking a number and waiting in line at the DMV. You don't have to wait your turn. You step up when you're good and ready to step up. And I hope all of you feel that tug at your heart to serve.
It's incredible, that real, aha moment. May we all have one, and hopefully soon. So Congresswoman Miller Meeks, I'd love to hear your response to the same question.
Well, I was back and forth going to the Congress as the first woman president of the Iowa Medical Society, and I was a delegate with the AMA, or the American Medical Association, and a counselor for the American Academy of Ophthalmology, and really had not thought about running for office. And my son, just totally out of accident, in his first year in college, I saw a little blurb in the newspaper that you could do an internship with Senator Grassley. Had it been Senator Harkin, our Democrat senator, it would have been the same thing. I cut it out. I send it to him in college. And I'm fully anticipating, you all may be young, but I think Donna and Martha will both connect with this. I was totally expecting him to throw it away and say, Mom, leave me alone. Instead, he said, Mom, I'd like to do this. And so our daughter had a national tumbling and trampoline meet in Newport News. He's doing this internship with Senator Grassley here in Washington, D.C. We come to fly into D.C., drive down to Newport News, and in the car, he's telling us of all of the senators he's meeting. He has Senator Obama's photograph and, autograph, and Senator McCain and Senator Graham and all of these people. And then he says, Mom, you're really smart. You could run for office and you could be a senator. And that Christmas, he gets me, you all aren't going to know what this is, but he gets me a CD with a book about a judge and how to run for office. And literally, I just said, I'm going to run for office because healthcare is important. And when I knew it was the right decision was actually after having lost. I had an individual come up to me when I was running again for Congress and bring to me their receipt for how much they were paying for drugs and talk to me about the fact that their prescription drug prices had quadrupled. And I knew I was doing the right thing and I was on the right path, no matter how long it took, no matter how hard it was, that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing.
Absolutely inspiring. And Congresswoman Edwards, how would you respond? What was that first moment for you?
I think the first moment took a while. I spent about 6 months going around my district trying to convince other people who already held elective office to run to challenge the guy that I ended up beating. And no one would do it because they all thought he had this big machine, he couldn't possibly be beaten, they didn't know how to raise the money. And I got really frustrated with that. And so on Good Friday, that morning, I knew that the Board of Elections office closed at noon on Good Friday. And I got up in the morning, I looked in the mirror, and I literally talked to myself. And I said, Donna, why don't you run? And because I'm psycho, my self-talk back to me and said, yes, you should do that. So I drove to Annapolis, filled out a couple of pieces of paper, wrote a check for $100 because that's all it cost. And I became a candidate for Congress. And I went through the entire weekend, Easter Sunday, church, dinner at my mom's house, told no one. And then on Monday, I realized that, well, whether I told them or not, people would, find out. And so then I decided I really had to start telling people and became a candidate for office. And so, again, another piece of advice, don't wait, don't wait for somebody to ask you, ask yourself.
Love that advice. Don't wait for someone else to tell you to do it. Do it yourself. That is such incredible advice. So transitioning to our next question, I would love to hear, what was one thing you wish you'd known when beginning your campaign? I think that's a great, we all can look back on our, decisions and our life stories, but what's one piece of advice you would have wanted to give your pre-campaign self? And I'd love to start with Congresswoman Miller Meeks.
I wish I would have known that it doesn't matter when you run. You don't have to wait for someone to ask you. But I wish I would have known that there was actually a Republican county chair and a state party chair, because I didn't know any of that stuff and just decided to run. So I would say there are resources available to you and familiarize yourself with them.
The resources and the accessibility of it all can be a bit difficult. So just having that, going out and seeking that can be really helpful. Congresswoman Edwards, how would you respond to that?
If I had to go back to my other self, I would have said, give yourself enough time and raise more money. In fact, my first election, I actually lost by about 2%. I went from 5% name recognition to losing by about 2%. And I think the 5% were my family members. I come from a large family. And I think I would go back and the second time that I ran and that I won, I raised way more money and I spent a lot more time on the campaign trail. And so maybe do that.
Great advice. And Congresswoman Roby.
Number one, don't knock on doors by yourself. So always take a buddy with you. That was back in my city council days. I would leave work early. I'd put on a t-shirt and shorts and I would head off to whatever street and, leave my little paper behind saying, sorry, I missed you, but definitely go with a buddy. That's the first advice I would give. My run for Congress, I had two very, very small children. So Margaret was not quite 4, and George was 12 weeks old when I first announced that I was running for Congress. And I would say that balancing your time, as in anything in life, is probably the most important thing. And a lot of what I had to learn by doing, and I had to make mistakes, and my husband and I had to learn from our not so great weeks to make the other weeks better. But I wish I had given myself a little bit more of a break in that first campaign and in those first couple of years running for Congress. It took me a while to find that balance that was so needed. None of us want to go to Congress, serve in public office, or take on some big job at the sacrifice of our families. And so just finding that sweet spot of what your calendar looks like and roping off that very precious time with your family. And again, we eventually got to a good place. It just took a little time. And again, some of that you can't just know. You have to figure out what works best for you and your family. But rule number one, don't knock on doors by yourself.
Finding balance, especially for women during COVID, has been particularly difficult. So that's great advice to keep in mind. So our next question, I would love to know, what's an experience that you had in school that prepared you for being in Congress? Congresswoman Miller Meeks, you talked about the importance of education, being able to access that. I'd love to hear, what was an experience you had that prepared you for this job?
I'm going to say that it was all the way back in second grade. As I mentioned to you, my family was a large family. They didn't want to show favoritism, so there wasn't a lot of applause or, trophies. We had no external activities. But in second grade, my dad was stationed in Michigan, and it's very cold in Michigan. And as you know, someone mentioned Chicago earlier. So we had one pair of gloves. We were very humble circumstances, and I had lost my gloves. And Miss Tenniswood, my second grade teacher, when we were out on recess at the playground, would take my hands and put them in her pocket. And I was a very avid reader. And so as a second grade, she put me in charge of a reading group. So while she was helping other students, I, as this little petite second grader, would have a reading group with the other students. And whether I knew that or not at the time, I think that's what gave me the confidence and the knowledge that somehow I had something to give to people and that I could be more than, just finishing high school and going on. So I just think back to that. It's one of the few teachers, having gone to school all over the country, the few teachers I remember, and I know that was very impactful for me.
The power of teachers cannot be understated, truly. Congresswoman Edwards, how would you respond to that?
Actually, Congresswoman Miller Meeks and I grew up very similarly. My dad was 30 years in the Air Force. He was a master sergeant when he retired. And I went to 14 schools when I was growing up. And so it meant that in every place, very quickly, I had to figure out how to make friends and find part of a new community. And it turns out that those are exactly the kind of skills that you need when you run for public office. The ability to talk to anyone, no matter, where they come from, and to meet them on their level. And I think that all of my experience growing up, it turns out, prepared me for that.
Incredible. And Congresswoman Roby?
I was a music business major at New York University in undergrad, and I was also the family wedding singer. Now, let me, say no one ever paid me to sing at their wedding. So, and I will spare you that now, but I'm going to tell you, not having one clue that I would end up in public service, but especially on the very large stage of having the privilege of serving in the House of Representatives. And for someone who still gets nervous to this day when I do public speaking events, I will tell you, all of those times that I sang in front of large crowds of people, little did I know that was God preparing me for every speech I was going to give as a member of Congress. And just that being comfortable enough, being just scared enough to try to get it right. And I'm so grateful now, looking back, of my desire to want to be a rock star, because it was that time on stage singing in front of strangers that prepared me for a career that I had no idea that I was headed toward.
The arts can truly prepare oneself for politics in a way that no one would really at the first believe, but truly. So this is our last question. It's a true rapid fire. It's our last one. One piece of self-care advice to young women interested in politics, to yourself. What's one piece of self-care advice? And let's start with Congresswoman Edwards.
Take a break, take a vacation, and don't be afraid to do it, and don't feel guilty about it.
Congresswoman Miller Meeks.
One of the things that I've done throughout my career is that whether I was a nurse or I was volunteering or as a doctor, when patients would send me a little note, and I would save those little notes and I would keep them in my purse or in my wallet. And if I was having a down day or a day where I didn't feel confident, I didn't feel like I knew anything, that I was feeling insecure, I would pull out that little note and I would read it. And so I save all these little notes. I still have them, but have something that for you is how you re-energize, how you center yourself. Because there are going to be days that are glorious and there are going to be days when you're really down in the dump. And the most important thing is that no matter how bumpy the road is, don't blame the road, get back on the bike.
We've all got to have our little notes in whatever form they may be. And Congresswoman Roby, wrap it up for us. Give us, what's your one piece of self-care advice?
Yeah, so I mean, these are both great. I would just put an exclamation point on what Donna said. You cannot be afraid to rest. You cannot make yourself feel bad for needing to take that nap. And I would say, just to expand upon that, find that place, whether it's, a closet in your house or your apartment or, your favorite spot on the couch or your chair on your back porch, whatever it may be, find that place that can be yours where you can regroup and you can breathe and you can reflect and you can do so without that pressure that you constantly are putting on yourself and that others are putting on you too. But again, I can't emphasize enough the not making yourself feel guilty about that, because you need it. You've got to create the space to recharge your batteries so that you can be all that you need to be for the people that you serve and your family and loved ones around you.
Thank you so much. Truly capping us off with an incredible note. Thank you all for such an insightful conversation, and I will turn it over to Melissa.
Sophia is the greatest example of a wonderful moderator and a Running Start alum who we absolutely love and adore. And thank you to Congresswoman Miller Meeks, Congresswoman Edwards, and Congresswoman Roby for joining us. You were amazing to share your time and to open up and give us a behind-the-scenes look at what it's really like to run and serve in Congress. And I'm going to introduce Sarah Blanco from our Running Start staff, who will play a video from our first Running Start alum to make it to Congress, who is Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, wonderful. So in addition to being our first official Running Start alum in Congress, Congresswoman Lauren Underwood is also the youngest Black woman ever in Congress, and she's also a nurse. So we have another person with a nursing background joining us, so to speak.
Hi, Running Start. It's Congresswoman Lauren Underwood from the Illinois 14th District. I am so excited to be with you for this year's Young Women to Watch Awards ceremony. I'd first like to thank all of the incredible leaders on the Running Start board. You all have done extraordinary work during exceptionally difficult times. And yet here we are once again, recognizing the incredible leadership of young women across this country. I decided to run for office because of healthcare and a promise that my congressman made around protecting healthcare for people like me with pre-existing conditions. You may come to this work, you may decide to run for office for a different but equally important reason. Whatever brings you here, I want you to have the confidence to see it the way through, because guess what? Our country needs your leadership. And during these really challenging times, this is when our voices are so strong and so powerful to bring change and make a difference. So I'm grateful to have resources like Running Start. I'm an alum, and I am grateful for this incredible network of women supporting the visionary leadership all across the country, particularly of other young women like me who have stepped up and run for office. I look forward to supporting your campaigns and serving with you, hopefully in the Congress one day. And until then, take good care of yourselves, everybody. Bye-bye.